Welcome back to TV2's election coverage.
We are officially in our second hour. I'm Sydney Brown.
And I'm Olivia Sharp. We now go to updates in the Ohio Senate race. Before we do that, we are going to talk with our reporter, Jacob Brooks, with us again from the Ohio Portage County Board of Elections.
What's happening over there, Jacob? Any updates? We're having some technical difficulties with Jacob, but we will try to get back to him to see what is happening at our local Board of Elections in Portage County. So currently the Ohio Senate race between Tim Ryan and J.D. Vance has been back and forth. The results currently, we have U.S. Senator Republican J.D. Vance candidate at 47.21% and Democratic candidate Tim Ryan at 52.79%.
Anyone who didn't vote absentee obviously had to vote in person today.
That's right. Noah Rowe is here how to talk about voting ID requirements in Ohio. Noah, what did people need to bring with them to vote today?
Thank you, Sydney. That is right. Anyone who voted today brought with them a form of ID. This could have included state or government issued photo ID as well as military IDs. Also valid as a form of identification with certain restrictions are utility bills, bank statements, government checks, and paychecks. These alternative forms of ID do not require an address that matches the registered voter's address and must be less than 12 months old. When voters hit the polls today, they didn't just vote for candidates. There are some big issues on the ballot as well. Issues 1 and 2. Issue 1 has to do with bail reform. It would require courts to consider public safety when they're setting bail for defendants. Issue 2 is a bit more complicated. Right now, federal law says you can only vote if you are a U.S. citizen. However, back in 2019, one small Ohio community wanted to let non-citizens vote in local elections because they did pay taxes. The Secretary of State eventually prohibited that from happening. Issue 2 would officially make it a law in Ohio that no local governments could override federal law and allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. Ohio law allows 17-year-olds to vote in the primaries as long as they would turn 18 by the general election. Issue 2 could change that. The proposed changes to the language in the state constitution would change what constitutional scholars call a, quote, grant of the right to vote to a restriction of that right. 574 17-year-olds voted in May, and while Issue 2 passing does not guarantee that that will change in the future, the ability for these younger voters to have their voices heard is up in the air should this issue pass. This has been Noah Rowe from the Franklin Hall studio, sending it back to Sydney.
All right, I believe we've solved those technical difficulties. Jacob joining us once again from the Portage County Board of Elections.
Jacob, what is happening over there?
Hi, so we've moved inside the Board of Elections, and behind me, these are all the poll workers that are coming in, dropping off the ballots. It's been a steady flow for about the last hour or so. So these are your votes, guys, coming in right now. So earlier today, I talked with Terry Nelson. She's the Deputy Director here at the Portage County Board of Elections, and she says they've had a pretty high turnout across Portage County today. She said they've had some lines, but nothing excessive, and she described it as, quote, pretty brisk when I asked her about voter turnout today. So overall, smooth sailing, and she did say it will be several hours until we get final results. As you can see, these ballots have not been counted yet, guys.
All right, Jacob, what has the mood been like at the polls? How are people feeling to get their vote out?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you're in here. A lot of these poll workers know each other. They've been hugging. They've been talking with each other, a lot like longtime friends. And we have overheard some of them. They said they've had good turnout today. Things have been going well. So overall, it's a pretty upbeat mood in here right now, guys.
Amazing show.
Jacob Brooks, thank you once again. He is continuing our coverage for us in Ravenna. Thank you, Jacob. Each generation has their own ideas and concerns in the community. Our own Nuried Hurtado has more on the main differences between generations during elections.
There are generational differences, clear generational differences in the things that we struggle with and the things that we need help with and the things that we would prioritize.
With midterm election, many issues are the concern for the community depending on different generations.
I mean, I think inflation is the biggest one right now. Like, I'm buying groceries for myself for the first time. I'm paying for my housing by myself for the first time, and everything is just so expensive.
Their stance on like climate change and how they're going to implement like different things in the area.
While young people have specific needs that they want the government to take care of, older generations just have something very clear.
I just want people to do their job and, you know, do what is best for the community.
If they're going to be fair or are they just trying to get elected, basically they have a good plan.
Students understand how important it is to make their voices be heard to make a change.
I think if people just voted, they could make a bigger difference than they realize. But I think that young people just aren't as motivated to vote because they think that it doesn't matter.
The more people that actually vote, the more likely there is going to be like a different outcome compared to just having like the older generation voting.
And experts agree with the importance of voting, especially for younger generations.
If we can cultivate the voting and make it a habit for this generation, they can't ignore you.
Reporting for TV2 News, I'm Nuried Hurtado.
Many students were at the polls today, but what about those students who decided not to cast their vote?
Our reporter Avery Savage has more on why.
Despite the large turnout of college-age students early voting during midterm elections, some students still do not plan on voting.
These elections don't seem to be as important to people as the presidential election is, even though these are the lawmakers that are making the majority of our decisions that affect our day-to-day lives.
When young people don't vote, issues that they care about aren't heard. Politicians want to reach their audiences, and if those audiences are older generations, they will align their messaging with them.
And then, one of the reasons I want my students to vote also is, even if there's not like a candidate who you feel 100% drawn to or you're excited about, when young people don't vote, politicians stop looking to them as a voting bloc.
Many students don't vote because of candidate controversy, bullying, and judgment from others.
You see the hatred with Congress, and you see, things like you see the insurrection, and you see the name calling, and you see, people don't even want to admit what political party they're with because they're afraid of being attacked.
Students on campus see the importance of voting during midterm elections, but find themselves having a lack of understanding and knowledge of the candidates.
I do know that some students are reluctant on voting or don't know much about it, so I think it's just about education.
The next major election is the presidential election, which will occur in November of 2024. Reporting for TV2 News, I'm Avery Savage.
More than 1,000 absentee ballots requested in a metro Atlanta county were never mailed out. That's according to the elections director for Cobb County, north of Atlanta. Officials say human error is to blame. Elections director Janie Elver says several staff members are exhausted from averaging 80 or more work hours per week. To fix the issue, counties sent absentee ballots by overnight mail, with prepaid overnight return envelopes, and for nearly 500 others, they were advised to vote in person.
According to research from the University of Florida, the increased early voting could signal increased polarization of voters, whether that be with issues like abortion or inflation. The same pattern was seen in the late 1800s, where the general public became highly involved in politics. Although the large turnout will not be felt in all states, some states like California and Texas are not expected to have record-breaking early voting numbers. Lots of issues on the ballot can be confusing, but most voters this year have taken the initiative to educate themselves. TV2's Gabe Collura has more on the story.
Whether you headed to your local city hall to physically cast your ballot in the 2022 midterm election using a voting machine, or you just threw it in the mail, experts say chances are pretty high that you informed yourself on this election, whether that be from the countless yard signs you saw around your city or based on your own research.
I think there is some evidence to suggest that midterm voters are actually more informed than the people who come out and vote in the presidential election.
Students and members in and around the Kent State community have done their part to research the policies in this pressing election and earn their sticker.
I did a lot of research on the judges. My dad had a spreadsheet of all the judges' bar scores and like their ratings, a nonpartisan ratings. So I think that was the most research I did.
I mean, I just read a lot of news. I read a lot of books. You know, I always look at candidates. I try to like do a lot of research about the actual policies that candidates and members of office have voted for. Honestly, I use Twitter a lot too. I follow a lot of journalists. I follow a lot of like pollsters, pundits. It's a good, I think it's a good way to aggregate information.
Several students have been taking advantage of the polling places around campus, much like the one at the Recreation Center. For TV2 News, I'm Gabe Collura.
Thank you so much, Gabe. Wow, that was a wonderful job done by Gabe Collura. Wonderful story there by him.
Exactly. Isn't it so awesome that people are getting out there to vote this year?
Absolutely.
I think the turnout this year has been so impressive.
Absolutely spectacular. There's been record-breaking turnouts. I know Kent State itself, as a voting population, we've had a lot of students, record-breaking, the most students ever. That's a stat from and our reporter Gabby Jonas is in Columbus at the Ohio Republican Convention, where Mike DeWine has been announced as the projected winner of Ohio.
Hi Gabby, how are you doing there?
Republican rally here in Columbus, Ohio, and as you can see, there are so many people here patiently waiting to see the results for J.D. Vance. Now, we already know the results for Governor DeWine. He has been reelected for the second term, but we are so patiently waiting to see what happens for J.D. Vance. People are already celebrating on what they hope to be a victory here. Booze, cocktails, hoping for the best here as we see the result, but right now it's looking like Tim Ryan is actually in the lead. So we are just waiting here until we see the results as they trickle in. Now we won't know the final until we get here later tonight, but we will check in later with you guys. Reporting live here in Columbus, Ohio, I'm Gabby Jonas.
Thank you, Gabby. As we said, live in Columbus. All right, coming up, we break down one of the most highly contested races in Ohio. Stay tuned.
These midterm elections voting stats are record-breaking.
I mean, I'm ready as soon as...
Secure. We are neighbors serving neighbors. That's why you worry less and enjoy the everyday moments. Portage Community Bank. When you grow, we grow right along with you.
Welcome back. We will head back to Boardman. Chris Abreu is live with updates on the Ohio Senate race.
Chris, are these numbers starting to lean toward one candidate?
Thanks, guys. I'm joined here with the Ryan Campaign's Communications Director, Katie Payette. Now, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, as ballots keep coming in for the night and results keep coming in, how do you feel about potential outcomes for this election?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. You know, we're excited, we're confident, we're hearing exactly what we've been hearing this entire campaign, which is people are fired up. And, you know, truly everywhere we go in Ohio, everybody's excited. You know, the momentum is on our side, and so we expect a victory here tonight.
And why do you think people should have voted for Ryan in this election?
So, you know, when Congressman Tim Ryan started this race, he started this race by putting workers first. And when he's going to go to the United States Senate, he's going to do just that. We need a fighter in the Senate who's going to fight for working class people. They're going to end the age of stupidity, and they're actually going to bring people together. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need in Ohio. It's exactly the kind of leadership that Ohioans are going to get tonight when we elect Tim Ryan.
And you also happen to be a pretty recent Kent State grad, so I wanted to ask, how's it feel to be a part of such a high-profile campaign?
Absolutely. Well, honestly, it's still kind of surreal in every single way, and, you know, I just remember my nights spending at TV2 election night, truly just the momentum and, you know, the excitement here, and truly you can feel it in this room. I mean, it's so loud, energy, I mean, there's tons of people here, but it just feels like a surreal moment, but also just one where, you know, I'm returning my roots. It truly feels like I'm coming home, and I'm home.
And what is your favorite part about your job? This is my last one for you.
Man, you're asking me the tough question.
Pretty general, pretty general.
I think it's about people. And I think that, I study journalism, and for me, it's just the ability to connect with people and can hear their story and hear really why this campaign matters so much to them. This is about so much more than us. This is about livelihoods. This is about being able to put food on the table. This is about being able to afford shelter and rent. Just all of these kitchen table issues that, Tim has in mind, and that's why we're gonna win tonight. People understand, Tim is the guy that's gonna get that done when we go to the United States Senate.
All right, thank you so much for joining me, Katie. Stay tuned because I'll have further updates as the night continues. Reporting live in Boardman, I'm Chris Abreu. Back to you guys.
All right, how cool is that, Sydney? As we mentioned, Katie, a former TV2 or one of us. She sat up here at this desk. She also worked behind the scenes, a former general manager for TV2. Now she works for Tim Ryan. How cool is that?
That's so cool. And we actually got to see her yesterday when we were interviewing Tim Ryan. And it's just so cool that Chris got to connect with her there as well.
And Democrat Tim Ryan and Republican J.D. Vance are going head-to-head for Ohio's Senate seat. Both of the candidates are confident that they are going to win the race. Some of the policies that Tim Ryan has are pro-choice and pro-union. Some of the policies J.D. Vance has are pro-life and to combat the drug and opioid crisis.
I think we're all in agreement there, and I'm the guy with the record on that stuff, and Vance is the extremist.
People are paying so much more for things that were pretty cheap a year ago, and now they're really expensive, and we got to get this inflation under control. We're going to have a generation of kids, a generation of moms and dads who can't afford the basic necessities. I mean, we're talking about fancy vacations. We're talking about eggs, bread, gas. People can't afford that stuff, and it's going to destroy this state if we let it.
Tim Ryan called out the Democratic Party this week as J.D. Vance took the lead in the polls. Ryan said the party doesn't have any good strategic political decisions in hope to gain more popularity with Ohio voters.
J.D. Vance is confident about the election, saying we're in a really good place, quote, unquote, and he thinks that we will win it and it won't be close. Several polls this week suggest that the race was tipping in Vance's favor, but Tim Ryan also has confidence about the polls. He says he has been counted out in the past races where he has won. Ryan added he thrives as the underdog.
The House, Senate, and governor races are extremely close for this year's midterm election. Democrats are bracing for a steep loss of seats in the House. Republicans are in a good position to retake the House as they have aggressively tapped into the Democratic Party and made them feel uneasy about the rate of inflation and crime. Democrats are also scrambling to maintain control of both the Senate and governorships around the country, as both of those could swing either way.
And currently, J.D. Vance is in the lead at 50.64% for U.S. Senator race. This is just above Tim Ryan at 49.36%. This race has been close all night. I don't know which way it's going to end up, but it is interesting that J.D. has the lead at the moment.
Absolutely. We saw right from the beginning when votes were starting to be counted, Ryan had a pretty large margin, a pretty large lead, and we really don't know what this race will come down to until the very last vote is counted.
Exactly. Early voting numbers are up this year. Many posted absentee ballots and participated in other early voting opportunities. CNN's correspondent Omar Jamens has the full story.
With 4 days until the votes are counted, the latest jobs report taking center stage in an election where the economy is issue number one.
Folks, our economy continues to grow and add jobs even as gas prices continue to come down. But we got a lot more to do.
Even as the U.S. economy adds 261,000 jobs for the month of October and unemployment remains historically low, voters across the country are expressing concern about rising prices.
People are scrambling to, buy gasoline so that they could go to work or figure out what they're going to have for dinner because the cost of food is so expensive.
Heading into the final weekend before Election Day, the battle for control of the Senate is on a knife's edge.
Folks are feeling everything from pain at the pump to the cost of prescription drugs and everything in between. And in the greatest country in the world.
In battleground Wisconsin, dueling bus tours as the candidates for Senate hope to drive voters to the polls.
Thank you.
Republican Senator Ron Johnson refusing to commit to accepting the results of next week's election.
I sure hope I can, but I can't predict what the Democrats might have planned.
What is your response to that?
He's shown us exactly who he is.
Johnson's Democratic opponent, Mandela Barnes, says the Republican senator's comments were to be expected.
It's the height of arrogance, but that's who he's always been. That's who he'll continue to be. They tried to overturn a free and fair election by sending fraudulent electors to the vice president. They weren't successful in 2021, and we won't let them be successful this year.
Johnson has claimed he had no knowledge of any fraudulent elector plot. Across the country, candidates from both parties bringing in high-profile surrogates for the final stretch. President Biden campaigning tonight in Illinois ahead of a visit Saturday to Pennsylvania, where he and former President Obama will rally for Democrats, including Senate nominee John Fetterman. Former President Donald Trump will also be in Pennsylvania, stumping for Republican Senate nominee Mehmet Oz. And while Oprah Winfrey helped turn Oz into a television star, she's hoping to halt his political rise, throwing her support behind Fetterman.
If I lived in Pennsylvania, I would have already cast my vote for John Fetterman for many reasons.
I mean, she's an icon. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's an honor, and I'm so grateful.
On Sunday, Biden will be on the trail in New York for Governor Kathy Hochul, while Trump heads to Florida for a rally with Senator Marco Rubio, but not Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. DeSantis releasing a new video today suggesting God created the Republican leader to be a fighter for Florida.
So God made a fighter.
More women under the age of 25 are registered to vote and could be a dominating group in these elections. Younger voters have registered this year near the historic levels of 2018. Many of these voters say they are concerned about having less choice over their bodies than their mothers and grandmothers. The single issue of abortion has driven many to become politically active.
A new study has shown that suburban women tend to vote for Republicans over Democrats, citing that they trust Republicans more with issues like the inflation or the economy. The Wall Street Journal found that most of those voters consider those issues most important when voting rather than women's rights, like the right to abortion, which many Democrats have made a key campaign issue. Women have taken over. After the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade, the number of women registering to vote in midterm elections has risen by 35% in 10 states. Data is showing that women have actually out-registered men in states like Wisconsin and Michigan, where reproductive rights are at risk. Analysts are suggesting that the abortion rights issue will upset all the usual political traditions.
A new exhibit premiered in Washington, D.C. supporting women's rights. The piece is called For Vote Your Young Daughter and contains 51 life-size statues. The creator, Maggie O'Neill, hopes it will make young voters think about women's rights ahead of today's election.
These are beautiful little girls in all shapes and sizes, and all of them are Americans, and all of them have lost their rights in at least 17 states, I believe. And the reason why it's so important, obviously tonight, if you think about it, is that I do believe that art can get to people in a different way than propaganda.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have more updates. In the election thus far, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, 61.34% of the votes. Nan Whaley has 38.66% of the votes.
Next up, we have Ohio Attorney General David Yost is at 58.45% ahead of Jeffrey A. Crossman at 41.55%.
Ohio Auditor of State Keith Faber leads 57.02% over Taylor Sappington, who has 42.98% of the votes.
Ohio Auditor of State, or an Ohio Secretary of State, we have Frank LaRose at 57.59%, ahead of Chelsea Clark at 41.29%.
Ohio Treasurer of State Robert Sprague has 56.81%. Scott Schertzer, Democratic nominee, has 43.19%.
Next up, we have Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. So we have Republican Sharon L. Kennedy at 54.37% and Democratic candidate Jennifer Brunner at 45.63%.
Justice of the Supreme Court Pat Fisher has 55.20% of the votes. Terry Jamison has 44.80% of the votes.
And continuing, we have Pat DeWine at 54.75% of the votes, while Marilyn Zayas has 45.25% of the votes.
We mentioned the lead change in this U.S. Senator race. J.D. Vance, the Republican nominee, has 51.53% of the votes. Tim Ryan now only has 48.47% of the votes.
In Representatives to Congress, David P. Joyce has 52.21% and Matt Kilby has 47.79% of the votes.
The National Guard cybersecurity took some measures for these elections, what they are doing to keep the votes secure.
What Obama is saying about how the Supreme Court would be different today if the 2014 midterm elections had been taken more seriously.
Is sponsored by Portage Community Bank.
Community, we take care of one another. When your dreams are big, we know it's important the advice is sound and decisions are made locally. When your time is of the essence, we understand you need life at your fingertips. When you invest in the future, we want your nearest and dearest to feel secure. We are neighbors serving neighbors. That's why you worry less and enjoy the everyday moments. Portage Community Bank. When you grow, we grow right along with you.
Welcome back. With results piling in and more batches rolling into our newsroom, let's see how Portage County is doing.
We are going back to Jacob Brooks, who is live from the Board of Elections in Ravenna. Jacob, what is going on?
Yeah, so just we do have some new numbers that are just coming in within the last few minutes. So this is as of 9 o'clock tonight. We got this packet. It says 57 of 129 precincts are reporting. As of now, the voter turnout is 32.5%. So I want to take a look at some of the big races, how they're doing here in Portage County. So I'm going to start with the race for governor. This is as of 9 o'clock. Mike DeWine is in the lead with 19,000 votes compared to Nan Whaley and Cheryl Stevens with 15,000. And then also Tim Ryan is leading for the race for U.S. Senator here in Portage County.
Can you explain the system of haven't they got the votes sorted yet?
Yeah, so they do have the votes sorted yet. They had a lot of people coming in until about 9:15, and then it got really quiet really fast. All of the precincts are now in. Kent City was the last one to come in. Farther out places from Ravenna, like Aurora, Hiram, Richfield, and Nelson were coming in too. And as for when we might expect more official results, an election official told me, quote, "It was a busy election, so I imagine it might be late."
How does this compare to the 2020 election?
Yeah, so we were talking with Deputy Sheriff Lee with Portage County, and he said that in 2020, during the presidential election, they had a line of people, ballot workers, turning in their ballots past 10:30 at night. So he said that this election, this counting process went a lot faster than in years past. Overall, from what we've heard from election officials, it's been a pretty smooth and well-run day here in Portage County, guys.
So much, Jacob. We saw him several times this evening, but that'll be the last time we see Jacob. Thank you for the excellent coverage. Now, many experts thought that the Senate race between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan would be a relatively cut and dry one in a state that Donald Trump has won twice.
It was not. After a summer of polling showing Vance as a close second, the Republican has pulled ahead in recent weeks, but as we know, the polls don't necessarily tell us who will win. Our reporter Raygene English is in Columbus now as they anticipate results in the Senate race, and Mike DeWine to take the stage to comment on his projected win.
Hello, Olivia and Sydney. As you can see, the room here in the Ohio Republican Party is buzzing with excitement here in Columbus. People are gathering and awaiting for Governor DeWine to take the stage to announce his victory. And we're also waiting on J.D. Vance to take the stage later on in the night. Everyone's enjoying food and drinks and lots of mingling around. So it is definitely a very exciting time for everyone here, and can't wait to see what happens when Governor DeWine takes the stage tonight.
Thank you, Raygene. Cybersecurity experts from the National Guard will be on hand in 14 states to help throughout the midterm election. They are there to make sure the election remains secure following the threat of Russian interference. The National Guard cyber forces also helped keep primary elections secure earlier this year.
President Trump announced that he voted for Florida Governor Ron DeSantis in today's election. Trump made this announcement after leaving his polling location to the media in Palm Beach. This claim comes days after he called DeSantis de-sanctimonious at a campaign rally in Pennsylvania when he was asked his thoughts on DeSantis's possible presidential campaign. Going now nationally and even globally, the effects of this election are being felt across the world.
Noah Rowe has these updates and more. Hi, Noah.
Hi, thank you. Former President of the United States, Barack Obama, highlighted the importance of midterm elections during a rally in Pennsylvania. In 2014, during the former president's second term, the Republicans gained control of the Senate and retained control of the House of Representatives. Former President Obama cited the results of that midterm election as the reason we have the Supreme Court we have today, and stressed that the midterms were, quote, no laughing joke. Continuing with the Supreme Court, our nation's highest court will soon have to decide if citizens who rely on government-funded programs, such as Medicaid, should be allowed to sue their states when they feel that their rights have been violated. The court began hearing oral arguments today, despite precedent of citizens relying on programs such as Medicaid having been on the books for decades. This election will impact not just the United States, but the world as a whole. A Republican-controlled Congress, while not able to undo previously passed climate funding, would be able to stop White House climate efforts for at least the next 2 years. And while both Democrats and Republicans have expressed support for Ukraine during their war with Russia, some Republican candidates have suggested they may reevaluate financial support for Ukraine if Republicans gain control of Congress.
One state is preparing for any emergencies at the polls, what they've done and why the Board of Elections feels it's necessary.
Thank you again for that report, Noah. A Louisiana school serving as a polling location received a bomb threat today. How the city responded.
This show is sponsored by Portage Community Bank.
Our community, we take care of one another. When your dreams are big, we know it's important the advice is sound and decisions are made locally. When your time is of the essence, we understand you need life at your fingertips. When you invest in the future, we want your nearest and dearest to feel secure. We are neighbors serving neighbors. That's why you worry less and enjoy the everyday moments. Portage Community Bank. When you grow, we grow right along with you.
Welcome back to TV2 with Tim Ryan falling behind in the votes. We go back to Chris Abreu for more details on what the mood is like down in Boardman.
Chris, what is it like down there? I hear it's close.
Thanks, guys. As ballots continue to be counted, tensions in this room continue to rise as new results come in, showing a very tight race between J.D. Vance and Tim Ryan. More and more people looking down at their phones for the latest updates, looking at the screens all across this room. Now, right now, Vance has a little over a 3% lead over Ryan. This race is very important considering it can shift the power balance in the Senate, which is currently 50-50 Republican to Democrat. Stick with Kent Wired in TV2 as the night progresses, and we will keep you updated on all the results coming here out of Ohio. Reporting live in Boardman, I'm Chris Abreu. Back to you guys at the desk.
For the excellent coverage from Boardman, more statistics are being released and they are helping break down the new results.
TV2's Elijah Chaffin has the CNN updates. What updates do you have for us?
Most of the early voters are aged 18 to 21, and in Ohio, record for the state. Two things are on voters' minds today while visiting the polls. The first thing is abortion access. Many Democrats are worried about the change with Roe versus Wade, while many Republicans are focused on high prices and inflation. These two factors are what many voters are basing their votes off of. An election in Michigan's 6th congressional district has caught some attention for a strange reason. Not because of a scandal or a dirty political ad, but because the Republican candidate can't be found. GOP primary winner Whitney Williams has been absent on the campaign trail and is untraceable. Her campaign office address leads to a USPS post office, and her phone number does not exist. So where is she? That is a question Michigan voters wish they could answer.
Election day has brought up safety concerns. One county in Illinois has set up panic buttons, specifically 5 tiny panic buttons that are hidden around the Bone Creek clerk office. County Clerk Julie Bliss says 9 of her election judges dropped out of working the election day, partially out of fear of the tense national political environment. At the state level, Illinois election leaders have said there are no known specific security threats so far, but there are measures there just in case.
Thank you so much, Elijah. A group called Clean Elections USA has Arizona voters feeling uneasy and intimidated while voting. The group has made their presence known outside the voter drop boxes in Mesa, Arizona. Starting as early as October 21st, when voters started to drop off their ballots, a pair of armed and masked men in tactical gear stood outside the ballot boxes. The group claims they are there to watch early voting and to look for any signs of fraud.
A scary moment on Election Day for a Louisiana school serving as a polling location. Police say Kenner Discovery in the city of Kenner received a bomb threat earlier today. The threat came after 2 Kenner Discovery campuses received robocalls bomb threats last week. The building was evacuated as a precaution, and voters were rerouted to another polling location. Authorities are investigating the calls.
We have more election updates. Republican candidate Mike DeWine has 62.66% of the votes. He has extended a very large lead over the Democratic candidate Nan Whaley, who only has 37.34% of the votes.
It keeps spreading. Mike DeWine's really taking this race at the moment. Now moving to Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost is at 59.98%, also taking this race ahead of Jeffrey A. Crossman at 40.02%.
We now look to Auditor of State. Once again, folks, these races are just getting further and further apart. Republican Keith Faber now has 57.41% of the votes. Democratic nominee Taylor Sappington has 42.59% of the votes.
Democrats started at the lead of this election tonight, but now the Republicans are taking it. It's quite interesting, and we will continue to follow it. But Ohio Secretary of State, we have Frank LaRose at 59.57% as the Republican candidate, once again ahead of Chelsea Clark, the Democratic candidate, 39.59%.
We now move on to Ohio Treasurer of State Sydney. Like you said, that pattern, Democrats starting out strong, but Republicans have gained as the votes are continuing to be counted. Republican Robert Sprague has 58.74% of those votes. Democrat Scott Schertzer has 41.26% of the votes.
It seems as if Republicans showed up to the polls this morning. So Sharon L. Kennedy, first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, is at 56.31%, ahead of Jennifer Brunner at 43.69%.
Justice of the Supreme Court, Republican Pat Fisher, 55.58% over Terry Jamison, the Democratic nominee, 44.42%. It'll be interesting to see how the other Justice of the Supreme Court race has turned out.
Absolutely. We have Pat DeWine at 55.13% and Marilyn Zayas at 44.87%.
We've talked about this U.S. Senator race all night. The gap for J.D. Vance just seems to be growing. He now has 53.25% of the vote, extending his lead over Tim Ryan. The Democratic nominee, Tim Ryan, has 46.75% of votes.
Congress, we have David P. Joyce at 52.21% as the Republican candidate, and falling behind is Matt Kilboy at 47.79%.
With inflation rising, it could mean trouble for Democrats in Congress. How the White House is trying to fix it.
The economy continues in a volatile state as inflation increases. How to combat the challenges politicians are facing.
This show is sponsored by Portage Community Bank.
Our community, we take care of one another. When your dreams are big, we know it's important the advice is sound and decisions are made locally. When your time is of the essence, we understand you need life at your fingertips. When you invest in the future, we want your nearest and dearest to feel secure. We are neighbors serving neighbors. That's why you worry less and enjoy the everyday moments. Portage Community Bank. When you grow, we grow right along with you.
All right, from Boardman to outside the Portage County Board of Elections to Columbus, we would like to thank our live reporters, Raygene, Gabby, Chris, and Jacob. They all did excellent jobs tonight, and our coverage wouldn't be as great without them. Absolutely. Economic policies have brought out many people to vote.
As inflation rises, Jalen Bankston is here to walk us through this hot button issue.
Thanks, guys. Inflation in America has risen at an alarming rate, and it is having a direct effect on this year's midterm election. Gas prices have risen by 20%, while goods and services have went up 8.2%, the highest it's been in another 40 years. Because inflation has soared while Democrats control the White House and both houses of Congress, Republicans have not had to work hard to make their case that it's time for a change. This may prove troublesome for Democrats in Congress, as the rise of inflation will be taken into consideration when citizens come to the polls for midterm elections. Another problem Democrats in office may face as America gears up for pivotal midterm elections, layoffs, volatile stock markets, and a central bank taking on inflation is representing Americans with one question: is the U.S. economy improving? Many citizens believe that the latter and that something needs to be done before it gets worse. Wages have risen, but not enough to fend off the high prices of simple necessities, essential to everyday life. This presents a difficult challenge for Democrats trying to hold on to congressional power in this week's midterm elections. That's all I have for you right now. Reporting live from Franklin Hall Studio, I'm Jalen Bankston.
Thank you so much for reporting live tonight, Jalen. We really appreciate it. It looks like misinformation is still an issue during our elections. According to the Washington Post, Facebook and Twitter have left candidates spread false information on their platforms without labeling the post as misinformation. Most of the claims have been about voter fraud. Facebook and Twitter pledged in 2020 to fight misinformation after it became clear that misinformation contributed to voter confusion. The Washington Post survey showed there have been 26 candidates who have posted false information since April, and the platform has not marked the post as false.
And we decriminalized marijuana in 29 cities total in Ohio, including Toledo, Dayton, Columbus, Cincinnati, Cleveland. This initiative protects over 2 million people in Ohio from being penalized for misdemeanor amounts of marijuana.
While marijuana has become legal in 19 states, Ohio is still one state that criminalizes the substance. Groups are requesting, quote, no fines, no times when it comes to marijuana charges. While it gets counted as a minor misdemeanor, members of the Sensible Movement Coalition said they've seen the damage criminalizing cannabis can do. One issue that they've seen is homelessness because of their record. Many say that this issue needs to change, and it will come from the people. There's been a change to President Biden's approval rating ahead of this year's midterm elections, what it is and why.
Is sponsored by Portage Community Bank.
In our community, we take care of one another. When your dreams are big, we know it's important the advice is sound and decisions are made locally. When your time is of the essence, we understand you need life at your fingertips. When you invest in the future, we want your nearest and dearest to feel secure. We are neighbors serving neighbors. That's why you worry less and enjoy the everyday moments. Portage Community Bank. When you grow, we grow right along with you.
Welcome back. A new poll shows that only 10% of Americans under 40 strongly approve of President Biden's performance. 25% of those polled strongly disapprove of Biden. Experts say this is not surprising because the approval ratings of both major parties and the Supreme Court are also down. Now, I'm sure most of you saw a lot of I voted stickers around today.
But the sticker poll workers are handing out in Ulster County, New York, doesn't look like what you're used to. Abby Carnival has the whole story.
Here it is. The Ulster County Board of Elections is sitting on a stash of voting gold. This unconventional I voted sticker. Ashley Dittis is the Ulster County Board of Elections Democratic Commissioner.
So they were all in the back of my car, and I said to the printer, I said, you have no idea how many people want this.
What will culminate in the fall began over the summer. The county BOE held a sticker contest to update the polling place mementos. That's when 14-year-old Hudson Rowan decided to get creative. He entered the Board of Elections sticker contest with a design that he feels resembles the current political landscape.
It was the first submission that we got, so I was extremely excited to open the email. I opened it, I saw it, I printed it out so I could walk it around to every desk and show everybody that works here.
It was a no-brainer for the Board of Elections. The design netted more than 200,000 votes in the contest, along with some national recognition.
We're telling the election inspectors, one per person, you have to make sure that we control the sticker distribution so that we don't run out and everybody will have their chance to have it.
Hold on to it. As it turns out, for some, getting out the vote can come down to getting a sticker.
They're apparently a lot more important than I ever knew, because people do get very upset if you run out or if you don't have any. There was one year we had none, and I think literally 100+ people came up and asked how come they can't get a sticker.
Love to see that 14-year-old get creative. We here in Ohio, we're also getting creative with our Ohio Voted sticker. And have you ever wondered where the iconic I Voted badge came from? Well, it's said that the bipartisan sticker came about during the 80s, during the Reagan era, and various organizations claimed the idea. The first president to actually wear it was George H.W. Bush. Here at TV2, we want to see you wearing your I Voted sticker. Tweet us at Kent Wired to share your contribution to democracy. Sydney, I must say, we talked about this during the break. We're both pretty bummed because I voted early and Sydney, you voted absentee.
Absolutely.
We did not get stickers.
We did not get our stickers. And I'm really sad about this because it's an experience when you go to the poll and get your sticker at the end. It's really rewarding. So I was a bit disappointed.
Absolutely. It's a badge of honor. You participated in democracy. You helped vote in what is going to be a very important midterm election. I want that sticker. If anyone out there has an extra sticker, talk to the two of us, okay? And if you got the stickers, your results will be coming in shortly, but let's take a look at what they're looking at right now. Right now, the Ohio governor race, it keeps just extending that lead for Republican Mike DeWine. That is over Nan Whaley, the Democrat. Mike DeWine has 63.03% of the votes. Nan Whaley, the Democrat, has 36.97% of the votes.
Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost has the lead over Jeffrey A. Crossman. Dave Yost once again is at 60.46%. This gap keeps widening between these two candidates for Attorney General. And once again, Jeffrey A. Crossman is at 39.54%.
We look to Ohio Auditor of State. Keith Faber has taken a very commanding lead with 59.07% of the votes over Taylor Sappington, the Democratic nominee, who only has 40.93% of the votes.
Moving to our Ohio Secretary of State, Frank LaRose is the incumbent, and he is at 59.70%. And he is the Republican candidate ahead of Democrat Chelsea Clark at 39.33%.
Ohio Treasurer of State Robert Sprague also has a very commanding lead over Scott Schertzer. Schertzer has 41.14% of the votes. Sprague has 58.86% of the votes.
Chief Justice of Supreme Court Sharon L. Kennedy is at 56.42%. Jennifer Brunner is at 43.58%.
Justice of the Supreme Court, Republican Pat Fisher, 57.25%. Democrat Terry Jamison, 42.75% of the vote.
And our additional candidates for this is Pat DeWine at 56.72%, following Marilyn Zayas at 43.28%.
If I've said it once, I've said it a whole bunch of times. Republican J.D. Vance has the lead in this highly contested Senate seat race, 53.35% over Democrat Tim Ryan, who has 46.65% of the vote.
And finally, we have Representative to Congress David P. Joyce at 60.26%, which is ahead of Matt Kilby as the Democratic candidate for at 39.74%.
And that is all the time we have for tonight. Thank you for joining us.
TV2 will be live again tonight and Instagram live streaming election results as they come in. I'm Sydney Brown.
And I'm Olivia Sharp. Have a great night, Portage County.
This show is sponsored by Portage Community Bank.
In our community, we take care of one another. When your dreams are big, we know it's important the advice is sound and decisions are made locally. When your time is of the essence, we understand you need life at your fingertips. When you invest in the future, we want your nearest and dearest to feel secure. We are neighbors serving neighbors. That's why you worry less and enjoy the everyday moments. Portage Community Bank. When you grow, we grow right along with you.